Howdy. Welcome to my runcast. Well, I'm having a hard day today. It's unbelievably hot. It's really bad. I'm tired and my hips hurt. So, wah for me today. I'm having a rough go of it. I wanted to point something out. I'm actually going to talk about something else, but I wanted to point this out first. Is that I've heard, I'll just say the English-speaking world, because I don't know where everyone is from. It's not always the West, but English-speaking. People talk a lot about the respect in Muay Thai and how great this is, and I guess they're comparing it to like the shit-talking in MMA and stuff like this, and I'll tell you, one is doing their absolute best to bring that bullshit into Muay Thai. RWS is doing it too, so I won't make it singular. But here's the thing that I want to point out, because it happened in Thai, so people who don't speak Thai wouldn't see this, but it's not unique to these people, and I don't know that it's necessarily unique to Muay Thai, but it's very, very common in Muay Thai. This is a thing that you will see very often, and so the reason it stands out to me is because it's not Western, not because it's unique to Thailand. There was this fight on RWS that was Kwan Kao, Pormung Pet. She's like 17 years old. She's I think she fights at like 56 to 58 kilos, something like that. She's been in a bunch of tournaments. She had her first like televised against a Farang fight at like 12 years old on like Muay Hardcore or something. If people aren't familiar, Channel 8 had Muay Hardcore, which was in the 4-ounce MMA gloves, and then they had Super Champ, which was in regular gloves, but otherwise pretty identical rule sets. They were on Saturday and Sunday, and they got rid of Hardcore, and then Super Champ has now become LWC Super Champ, and they fight at Lumpini 3 rounds, and then the main event on that show will sometimes be a 5-round belt fight, or the final of a tournament. So Kwan Kao was scheduled to fight a girl who I'm not familiar with, can't remember her name, so non-Thai, and she had to pull out last minute, and so Mary, who now has the Kongsita Muay Thai gym name, but at the time that I fought her was Mary Verona Farm. She's Thai. She's been around a long time. She's like, I don't know, 34 years old or something like this. She maybe walks around at 56, 58 kilos. She fights at like 52. She stepped in on like 2 days notice. And so I guess because she didn't really have to cut much weight, if any weight, for that weight class, she was able to just come in. And when Kwan Kao shared a photo of their weigh-in, this is a 17-year-old, by the way, when she shared the photo of them together, she said, I want to thank P. Mary. P in Thai is the word you use for an older sibling, so it means like big brother or big sister. So she's like, I want to thank P. Mary for stepping in and taking this fight so that I can fight tomorrow. This is something you hear from Thais very, very often, which is they thank their opponent for coming and having the fight with them, because if you don't have an opponent, you don't fight, you don't get experience, and you don't get paid. So all this like, I'm gonna kick her ass and I'm not scared of her and she's not gonna be a good fight for me, like all this bullshit that nobody actually really likes to see, although somehow it's become incredibly popular and they use it in boxing and MMA and now apparently Muay Thai. It's not how Thais do it, and this is really more of what you'd see, and I think it's rather nice. So while things are kind of shifting towards the international Globo Gym way of doing things, because the commercialization is the direction everything's headed in, this still exists, this still is the norm, and it made me happy to see. So that's the first thing I'm talking about. The second thing, welcome to my runcast. Y'all are gonna be in my therapy session today. This is a therapy session for me. I was listening to, so Dax Shepard is an actor. I know him from Idiocracy. He's I think his name was Frito. He's the guy who's like, Scott, what plays font? He's been in other things. I don't know what he's from other than that. But he has this podcast called Armchair Expert, and he's really intelligent. He's married to Kristen Bell, who I think a lot of people would know. She's the voice of one of the princesses in Frozen. But he's very, very smart. He's intelligent. He's very honest. So he talks about his struggles with addiction, his actual non-regrets about recovering addiction and stuff like this. So I like listening to him. I don't always love his guests and that kind of stuff, but they're very long podcasts, so they're really good for running because they're like 2 hours. So I can listen to one on a long run or something like that, and this is very helpful for me. But he was talking to Chris Pine, the actor, and Chris is a recovered addict of who fucking knows, definitely alcohol, but he didn't specify what the other things were, but definitely recovered. And one of the things they were talking about was a relapse that Dax had. After 16 years of being sober, he had a relapse. And he called Bradley Cooper, also a recovered addict, who was like, well, what are you going to do? Because a huge part of your identity and personality and what you talk about on the show is your sobriety. So, like, how are you going to deal with this? And Dax was really honest about it, and he's like, well, I guess I'm just going to have to talk about it and be honest about it. And something that Bradley Cooper said to him was, you know, you're going to help a lot more people by having eaten shit and relapsed after 16 years than had you never, because the reality is most people will have a really, really hard time, rather than most people will have this, like, I'm a movie star married to Kristen Bell who's been sober for 16 years. Like, that's not the recovery story that most people have. And I was moved by this story, or by this piece in the podcast, because I think that there's a growing assumption, or almost like it's not, can't think of the word. People who are fighters kind of almost have to have some kind of social media now. Anyone who does anything almost now has to have some kind of social media. And we have varying degrees of interest in it, capacity for it, and things like this. And there are some people who really, really love the social media part of it, and they excel in it, and then fighting's just kind of this thing that is the topic that they're talking about. And then there are people for whom really fighting is the thing that they're doing, and they have to do the social media part because it's expected, mandatory, that's the word. It's become kind of mandatory. I've heard actors on podcasts talk about how now they actually ask you, like, how many followers you have as part of your audition. Like, this is actually part of how they cast people now, is like whether they have recognition to begin with, which to me is absolutely crazy. But it had me thinking about how I've been doing this a long time. I absolutely never intended for lots of people to look at what I was doing. When I first started posting my Master K training videos, it was honestly to help me remember what he was teaching me, because it was an hour of like high level PhD Muay Thai that I couldn't remember what he was teaching me, and it's very, very technical. So I wanted to be able to review it, but then also, like, who gets to train with someone like Master K? So I made it public so that anyone who could kind of stumble upon it could also at some point learn something from it. I didn't think I was gonna have like 1 million views of anything ever. Like, this was not my intention. And then I actually didn't make vlogs and stuff initially. I'm a writer, so I had a blog going at the same time, and because I'm a writer, the way that I was like processing the experiences I was having and the struggles I was having and the way I was thinking of things, and becoming a fighter is fucking, it's an intense thing because there's a performance and a public element to it. I was just trying to process it. Like, I was trying to do things in my Muay, and then becoming a fighter and all this stuff, so I was writing about it too. And I wrote for many, many years. I think I have like over 1,000 blog posts or something that stretched into when I moved to Thailand, and then eventually I just kind of stopped writing and started doing more vlogs. You know, I have lots of these vlogs and stuff like this. But so I didn't intend for this, but this is the reality. This is what's here. And I think that one of the things that I found to be very gratifying about it is that it fits with my values, in that I try to be very honest and I try to be very open about what I'm experiencing, what the reality of things are. When I was training with Master K initially, he wanted me to make like highlight videos. He's like, cut out all this shit where you look terrible. I didn't want to do that. One, because I wanted to actually show the process of learning it. And two, because even if I made a highlight reel, I was never actually very good at any of the things yet that he was showing me. So it was like, make a highlight reel of looking mediocre anyway, it's just shorter. And I've kept that ethic, honestly. Like with the Muay Thai library, we use the long form video because I want you to see the process of learning something. Like, you don't get something right away very often. And there are times I don't get it at all within the session. And then when I'm doing my voiceover and looking at the footage later, I'm like, oh, now I see what I'm doing wrong, or I see what he was trying to teach me, or something like that. And to me, that's important. It's a learning process. It's it's not Cliff's Notes kind of thing. And so for me, this is a little bit of like what Dax was saying, or what Bradley Cooper was telling Dax, is like, it actually helps much more people that you failed than it would be if you just, have this kind of incredible life that motivates people. It's wonderful to win lots of fights. It's wonderful to have lots of fights. It's wonderful to be champion, to have achieved things. That motivates people, and that's cool because people see that and they're like, if she can do it, I can do it, and they move towards it. That's Sylvie Charbonneau was a huge inspiration for me. She had 50 fights. I have no idea how many she won or lost. That's not an important part of it. But she had 50 fights in Thailand, or 50 fights altogether. Not all of them were in Thailand. But I was like, fuck, that's a lot of fights. And I was like, she's my size. If she can do it, I can do it. And I didn't know, actually, whether I could do it, but I was motivated to try. And in my expression and sharing of what I do, having achieved a lot, having become world champion, having all these different things, and I still lose fights. Like, you still lose. You can be very experienced. You can have just won some huge fight that you have reached some kind of like achievement board, and then you lose your next one. And that's just a fact of how things work. Like, in fighting sports, unless there's a draw, which is supposed to be kind of unusual, 50% of the people on that card that night are going home having lost their fight. You're not a fucking asshole. Like, you don't suck for having lost your fight. 50% of the entire card is going home having lost their fight. They don't suck. It's not a problem. It's part of how the sport works. Hi, babies. And so I think that's important to share. Like, hi, honey. You don't actually ever get to have this, like, I achieved it and now I'm done experience of, like, I never have to challenge myself again because I won the belt or I did the thing and now I get to put it on a shelf and I am forever admired for this thing. People will admire you for it. You still did it. Like, it's not like it gets taken away from you even if you lose your next fight. And I think it's important to share those things. And so I try to kind of share those things. Both to be honest to myself and also because I think that it's at greater service to more people to be honest about those things rather than trying to, like, create a false, picture of the way things are in your head or the way things you wish were. So you, like, curate it in this way that it's like, this is not actually my reality, but I can kind of, like, present it that way. Because you still know, baby, no. Because you still know what the reality is. Like, you can fool other people, but you're never actually going to fool yourself. So the like joy or reward you might get out of having fooled people into thinking that you are something that you're not, you'd have to be kind of really in there to fool yourself about it. And so I think it's not actually very valuable. And then the second thing I was thinking about, because another episode I was listening to was a woman who's not only is she a PhD in psychology, but she is a sociopath. Like, she's a diagnosed sociopath, which is really interesting. She wrote an autobiography, which is kind of helping both neurodivergent people and neuronormative people, neurotypical, I guess is the word, to understand what sociopathy really is, because I think people have a lot of misconceptions about it, that, like, you're always Patrick Bateman or something like that, which is like, these are tendencies, but it doesn't mean that everyone is criminal and that kind of thing. But what was kind of interesting, or what it got me thinking about in terms of myself, is that I I have a lot of complexes, but I have a lot of shame. Like, the way that I was raised, the world I was kind of experiencing as I grew up, and all these things. I am fucking good at the shame spiral. It's my favorite medium. I can paint any situation with that brush. It's the first thing I reach for anytime I'm like trying to understand a situation. Shame is just like, it's my jam. Working on it, but it's not easy. It's not easy to move away from, because it's kind of like an automatic habit kind of thing. And the thing about shame that's kind of interesting is that it requires secrecy, like it requires hiding. So when you're ashamed of something, you try to hide it. You don't want people to know about it or see it or whatever. I think it was Cara Lowenthal who has this podcast that's called Unfuck Your Brain. She's like a life coach. I love a lot of the stuff that she talks about, but because she's a life coach, everything is like selling a course. But she talks about how in order for shame to work, because you have to hide with it, it has to be secret, it is impossible to be ashamed of something that everyone knows about and doesn't care about. So those are the like two qualifiers. Everyone knows, nobody fucking cares. So part of my sharing is not only just at the service of other people, of like, hey, when you share more about yourself and your own experiences, I will constantly run into people who, when I talk about having a really, really bad day at sparring, or something that I was experiencing or that was freaking me out, people are like, I almost feel like crying during sparring sometimes. Is there something wrong with me? And you're like, no, that's actually totally normal and will never go away. So it's this thing that it's like, nobody talks about it, and so you think it's this really shameful, secretive thing, but it's only because no one talks about it. But actually, once you find out that like tons and tons of people have this experience, it takes a load off, because you don't have to be ashamed of it anymore, because it's like, no, this is just a normal thing. I think people who are conditioned as women in the world, or who identify as women in the world, have very much this experience, because female bodies are incredibly shamed, publicly shamed, scrutinized, talked about, like period taboos, fucking all kinds of stuff. Like, we're good at shame. Like, we have been shamed for a really long time. And so the more you talk about things, the more you get like little groups of women together, and we start talking about these things, and we're like, oh no, I have that too. Oh no, this is something I experienced too. And you're like, oh shit, I didn't know that that was normal. I kept that a secret because I thought there was something wrong with me. And once you talk about it, once it's out in the open, and you're like, oh, nobody actually has a problem with this, you can't be ashamed of it anymore. So, as I'm saying, like, it's not only a service to other people that I share about my failures, and that I share about my struggles, and that I talk about things that are not fucking awesome in my process of doing the things that I do, is that because I am so predisposed to shame, I think also it helps me a great deal to share it, because I do also believe I don't have any unique experiences. Like, I do think that there may be details about what you're experiencing or what you're struggling with that are unique, but the feeling you have about it, or what's causing you to feel that about it, is never unique. And finding out that other people feel that way too is really reassuring. And you can bond over it with complete strangers, which is kind of interesting. And it's just a relief, like being able to talk about something instead of be like, I can never talk about this because it's shameful, and if anyone knew about it, they would know that I'm fake and I'm terrible and I must be the worst person in the world. And other people are like, oh no, yeah, every Tuesday. It's like that every Tuesday. I think that's very valuable to yourself and to other people to share those kinds of things. So that's my therapy session for today. Thank you guys for stepping in. I'm about to get home, so thank you. Talk to you later.